Hi, this is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. Well, I've been watching some YouTube influencers go at it, and there's been some serious debate over the last few weeks over what is the big danger facing America's diet. Is it sugar? Is it ultra-processed food? Is it industrial seed oils? What's causing this epidemic? And I'd like to throw my 2 cents into the debate, and I think I've got an answer. The answer is yes. Frankly, all of them have a negative effect. And I think, if you want to have the definitive study that shows which one is the most destructive, you're not going to find it. I mean, this is one of these areas where you have to apply your own common sense to the debate, and you have to look at history, and you have to be able to look at, okay, what's been going on? And look at the big picture, because every now and then you just have to pull back and look at the big picture and just take a look and apply some common sense to the situation. And when you look at, okay, what was killing people back during the 19th century? Well, it was unsanitary conditions. I mean, there wasn't any modern sewage. I mean, if you really want to wonder why there's this big increase in life expectancy and why people were healthier for a good hunk of the 20th century, it frankly was sewage treatment. I mean, the fact that, that having modern plumbing is a phenomenal thing. I mean, when you can sanitize water, and have pure water for people, that is remarkably a remarkable health effect. One of my favorite charities is Water4, based out of here in Oklahoma, and just getting pure water, clean water to people dramatically changes people's lives. So clean water is a tremendous thing. Not having running sewage down the middle of your streets is going to do wonders for everybody's overall health. The fact that we can deal with antibiotics, we can treat infections that would normally kill people for most of human history. And the fact that, we have just learned so much about protecting the human body and repairing it from horrible traumas that used to kill people should make this a golden age, but it really isn't, because we are probably the most unhealthy we've been in the history of the planet, except for maybe when the Egyptians were running things for a while. That's another video, but let's talk about what changed from the 20th century. And what's interesting is you can look at the hospital records at Boston General, and those are remarkable, to see what was going on health-wise in the 19th, early 20th century. Because, here's this major city, they had kept meticulous records, and what was killing people were mostly, the diseases that we talked about earlier. But what was absent was what's killing us today. People were not dying of cancer. People were not having macular degeneration. There wasn't a lot of type 2 diabetes floating around. There weren't very many heart attacks or cancers. Those were rare. Matter of fact, the first recorded heart attack was such a big event that, my gosh, this guy's heart quit beating. And it was like front page news in medical journals. It was so weird that somebody would just have a heart attack like that. But all of a sudden, things started to change. The number of heart attacks started increasing throughout the 20th century, and became what was considered an epidemic when Eisenhower had a heart attack, and people started looking around going, my gosh, these things are becoming the number one killer in the country. And cancers are becoming the number one killer. And people assume that it was just because our longevity had improved. But frankly, I don't think you can say that it was the increase in longevity, because people, if you didn't die of trauma and you didn't die of an infectious disease, odds are you lived into your 70s, 80s, 90s, and you didn't have heart attacks. So there's probably something else that was happening. And when you look at what it got introduced into our food supply, that's where things really make a stark change. Vegetable seed oils, or what I call industrial seed oils, because there's no vegetables in them. They're corn oils. They're basically seeds that have been industrialized, turned into an oil-like product, and those became ubiquitous. Crisco was introduced at the beginning of the end of the 19th century, really took off, and the 20th century became a staple of our food supply. I mean, frankly, they're in over 80% of our food right now, and it's only getting worse. And that increases the amount of linoleic acid. And if you don't think that's a problem, then you really need to take a look at the Minnesota Coronary Heart Study that really showed that, hey, you can reduce somebody's cholesterol level by giving them skim milk and margarine and substitute industrial seed oils for saturated fat. And yes, you can reduce their cholesterol, but you kill them. So that's not a good trade-off. So that got into the food supply. And at the same time, the amount of sugar that people started eating started increasing dramatically during the 20th century. And ultra-processed food became known. I mean, before food was industrialized, people made bread the way we used to make bread in our family. When I had kids here, what we would do is we'd have once a week, we'd make bread. And we would grind our own wheat and make it using old-fashioned process where we actually let the yeast do the work, do 2 rises on it. And the stuff was fantastic. And what was great about it was one slice of bread and you were full. I mean, you couldn't eat 2 slices to make a sandwich. You basically took, one slice, filled it up with meat, and because if you had tried to eat 2 pieces, it would fill you up too much. So, and that's the way, matter of fact, our bread in the United States can't be sold in Europe because they don't consider it bread. Because frankly, it's ultra-processed wheat. They don't let the bread rise naturally. They do a bunch of chemical fermentation. It's an ultra-processed food. It has nothing to do with the way bread used to be. And all the other stuff that happened, with ultra-processed foods coming into effect, where we're substituting old ingredients and replacing them with things like, that were highly subsidized crops. And then we even made it worse, if you can imagine, where you take sugar, which is already bad enough, and replace it with high fructose corn syrup back in the 1970s. Now you've made the situation even worse. So all these things are all kind of coming together, and then to make matters even worse, the government put their nose into the debate. And the McGovern Commission decided that they were going to try to give us a recipe for a healthy diet, created the food pyramid, all these government standards for what they considered a healthy diet, which was all low fat, very little red meat, very little real saturated fat, and getting rid of the whole ingredient foods. And voila, we've now got this total recipe for disaster. So all of a sudden, look at what happened during the 20th century and what started killing us. Heart attacks, cancers, dementia, Alzheimer's, macular degeneration, diseases of inflammation that, went rampant. And then government started pushing for less red meat, and obesity goes through the roof. Frankly, and can you say, with certainty, one of these things is the cause of it? No, I don't think you can. But when you look at the totality of it, you can't help but escape the conclusion that this is the change that happened. Gee whiz, I'm not going to do that. And if you don't do that, you're better ahead of the game. I mean, it's one of my favorite sayings is, look, if you want to make change, look at what other people have been doing for generations and don't do that, and you're probably going to be ahead of the game. Frankly, maybe you ought to quit listening to influencers that are like 20 and really healthy and bouncing all over the place going, oh, golly, the secret to success is this, and start talking to fat people. Go up to a 40-year-old dude that's 40 years old, fat, out of shape, can barely walk down the block, and ask him, hey, what do you do? Find out what he does, and don't do that, and you're probably not going to become that. When you look at what people are eating in this country, about an ounce of red meat every day, that's too little. And if you don't do that, if you eat more eggs than they eat, and you eat more red meat than they eat, odds are you're going to be healthier than they are. frankly, when you look at the numbers and you realize that only 10% or so of this country is metabolically healthy, and you trying to track down those people and figure out what they're eating is, would be a good thing. But the easier thing to do is to find the 90% that ain't, figure out what they're doing, and don't do what they're doing. Then you're probably ahead of the game. This is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. Look, frankly, realize that we've got a psychopathic system that is working hard against you being healthy. They don't care. I mean, they are giving you advice to help fill their pockets, but not to make you healthy. Nothing in the system is out there. You've got to figure this stuff out for yourself. And that's what this channel's for. I try to put out a couple messages each week. Please hit the like and subscribe. I will talk to you again soon.